Hey everyone, welcome back to Game for Thought. We are continuing the podcast series today, talking all about recruitment and kind of where recruitment in the games industry stands in 2025. I'm Allie Weiss. I'm the ethics coordinator at Howest Digital Arts and Entertainment, located right here in Kortrijk, Belgium. And we'll just jump right into it today. I'm joined by Connor Curran, who is busy doing amazing things in recruitment at IO Interactive, located in sunny Barcelona. Is it sunny over there?
It's not sunny right now, but it is usually. And
And
yes,
usually sunny.
it is. Yes. But yeah, so I'm based out of the Barcelona office, but we actually have 5 locations across the globe, and yeah, we definitely probably get more sun.
Awesome, Connor. Thank you so much for joining me here today. First of all, I'd love to hear more before we really jump into the nitty gritty about how you first got started in the games industry in recruitment, and where that journey has taken you until today.
Yeah, definitely. Well, um, I basically kind of stumbled into a career in recruitment. Like a lot of people, and I felt it was just immediately something that I really enjoyed. I was quite good at, but I didn't actually get a chance to break into the gaming industry until about 5 or 6 years ago. But up until that point, I had some experience doing, internal recruitment, small sidestep into HR, uh, back into recruitment. And it wasn't until I came to Barcelona and my first taste of the gaming industry was with Social Point. Social Point are a mobile gaming company, um, huge in Barcelona. They're a Catalan company, and they had some very successful hits, Monster Legends, Dragon City, and it was awesome. It was the first time actually working in an industry where you were surrounded by people and you were thinking, these are my people. Everyone was just so passionate about what they were doing. The end product was really, really important. And, I think when you work in an environment that's surrounded with creative people, but also very, very technical minds, and then you see that kind of collaboration happening in real time. And as someone who doesn't necessarily have anything um, to bring to the table in terms of like hard skills or like art skills, I can't program, but being able to bring,
Hello, me too, Connor.
yeah, you
Same, we're in
know,
the same boat here.
and I pondered this for a while, but I still doesn't. I don't think that diminishes our impact in the industry because ultimately our roles kind of are to bring these types of people together, and by creating those scenarios where that happens, that's where we make awesome games, or we can create these great forums for discourse, so on.
Yeah, and it also is kind of the case, and I'm sure that sometimes, like, as somebody that didn't study game development or something like that, maybe at some point in your career you felt a little bit like an outsider. But I also believe strongly, because I'm kind of in the same boat there, that being an outsider actually does add a fresh perspective in multiple different domains. And actually, we need diverse teams and people from different backgrounds working together. So that's also what I tell myself as well.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's a really cool career trajectory, and I think it's always so interesting to see where life can take you if you didn't, like, plan to be in the games industry and in recruitment from day one. You
Yeah.
mentioned that you've been in games of recruiting for about 5 or 6 years now.
Yes.
So that's pre-corona, I guess.
Oh
And I
yeah.
wanted to, yeah, and I kind of wanted to ask you, if you compare 5, 6 years ago with today, what are if you were to reflect on the main differences in terms of recruitment at IO, in terms of industry wide recruitment, what are the main differences that you're seeing, or what has that evolution kind of looked like over the years?
Yeah, okay. So it's an interesting one because I think the biggest and the most obvious one was definitely the advent of remote working, and all of a sudden, studios being forced into scenarios where if they wanted to continue production, they have to adopt the remote model, and that wasn't a decision that they made just because they wanted to try it. That was completely forced. And what a lot of studios found was, hey, actually, this is possible. You know, IO managed to achieve this. Lots of other studios managed to achieve this, and I think that was just a huge culture shock to a lot of people. I mean, plus the pandemic itself, but that there was a huge shift in how people perceive work culture and what's possible. So as the restrictions started to lift and people started to be able to choose to go to the office, and then more hybrid models started to evolve. I think the biggest thing is people now very much value that flexibility, and having that flexibility is a massive, massive advantage, especially when you're trying to attract talent.
Yeah, yeah. Do you often have, then I can imagine candidates that are applying for positions asking about the remote policy?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fair question, and there's a lot of candidates out there who are still seeking remote work. It works for them. But I think it's at IO, we really tried to kind of strike the balance between offering that flexibility, but also creating those moments where people can come together. Our
Yeah,
teams
yeah.
are getting bigger, and each locations have like nice team pockets where they can come together, and it is a real shame to kind of miss out on those opportunities. Although, we are flexible as well, and I think that you need to do that in order to, yeah, be competitive.
Kind of more specifically in terms of recruitment, there's diversity and different profiles that are being sought after to work for a studio. So you have the more like technical artist profile, and then you have more programming heavy profiles. You have sound designers, et cetera, et cetera. How do recruiters um, kind of conduct the interview process or the recruitment process for a more technical profile, so maybe a
Hmm?
more like programming focused profile and a more art centered profile? How does that recruitment or interviewing process go? Does it differ depending on the profile that you guys are looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely some core differences, but there's some big similarities as well. And I think as a standard, we try to break it down in sections, right? So first thing that we're looking at in first stage, which is with the recruiter, does this person have the kind of the qualities? Are they displaying some of the attributes that we look for when we're hiring into IO on a cultural level? Are they engaged? Are they excited about contributing to the game? Are they just excited about games themselves? Is this what they're passionate about? Are they clear on what they want to do next professionally? All of these things indicate to us, okay, this person's into it. And usually what happens is the hiring managers already had a look at this profile. So if we're already kind of getting past this stage here, it's very good. Now, this is when it kind of starts to differ depending on the craft. So I would say for more technical roles, we definitely rely on some testing software because, we use C++ for some of the low level stuff, Sharp for other things. And we really do have quite a high benchmark in our backbone team, which I'm pretty proud to shout about. And yeah, I mean, we need to kind of see basically how people are attacking problems. At the end of the day, all of our games are powered by Glacier. It's our internal proprietary engine. It's a beast. It's very powerful, and it can be quite difficult to learn. But those who kind of show great test results, and then through the technical interview, which is an opportunity to have more of a direct discussion with the hiring manager, the technical director. It opens up the floor as well to those who may not have performed well in the test due to maybe some time constraints. And it gives them an opportunity to maybe show their approach to problem solving on a real time basis, which I guess is a way that we can open the flow really, because I know it's time tests, they can be difficult at times. So we try to keep an open mind, basically. Once you kind of get through all the technical stages, at that point there, you've probably developed a sense of this person and how they're going to interact with the team on a day-to-day basis. On the artistic side, this is very much more subjective. The team are very heavily involved on the portfolio review. Depending on what the role is, you're going to have a lot of feedback. There may be a test involved again. Um, but yeah, I think, if you just break it into two sections, culturally, is this person a good fit for us? And then technically, yeah.
I can imagine with, because you mentioned for both the more technical profiles and artistic profiles, and this is kind of standard in the industry as well. A lot of studios do this during the recruitment process, the tests.
Yes.
I and in conversations with students as well, even like first year students that I see in my classes, the when that word comes up as part of the hiring and recruitment process, it's like immediate anxiety. And I'm just wondering, as a recruiter, are there any kind of techniques or things that you could recommend to people who are kind of in that process, but maybe have a lot of anxiety regarding timed testing of skills?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good question. And I think the answer is very determined based on, okay, is this person fresh out of university? Is this one of their first roles where they're kind of applying for? Or is this maybe a senior artist who's been through multiple recruitment processes before? If it's the latter, I would be saying, well, it is common in the industry to face these tests. I think a conversation with your recruiter and your hiring manager about what's feasible based on, your work commitments, personal commitments, so on. How long is the test going to take? I think that's an important question that candidates should be asking studios. Um, to accept the test and not really have an idea about how much time to allocate, that can also cause a lot of anxiety, I've heard as well, and I can totally understand why, not really knowing how much to give, what are the other candidates giving, and candidates are well within their right to request that information. I think on more of a junior level, again, share your concerns with your recruiter and your hiring manager. I think all people who are involved in the process, certainly in our studio, but just across the gaming world, I think they want to see people succeed. Okay, we don't want to see people fail in interviews. So if we can adjust something to make some accommodations to get the best out of you, then that's obviously the best strategy for us. So
Yeah, it's really nice that you mentioned asking for clarity and asking questions during the interview process. I think that sometimes the anxiety can be a little bit paralyzing, especially like as you mentioned, if it's your first go at an interview after university
mhm.
for a full-time position. Kind of along the same line as asking questions during an interview, I remember like in when I was applying for jobs, I remember people would always tell me it's really important to ask questions during an interview, come up with some questions, even if you like don't have many that are popping up in your head, make
Yeah.
sure you ask something. And I wanted to ask if that applies also, in your opinion, to the games industry, where the importance of asking questions to your interviewer or hiring manager is really
Yeah.
important. And kind of along those lines, what questions would you
O-
recommend?
Okay, so yeah, so this is quite funny actually because I had a great example of this recently, and I think that the best questions that you can ask as a candidate are ones that are going to come to you organically, providing that you do your research, okay? Candidates who might not go through like a research phase where they're investigating, okay, checking out the website is kind of the bare minimum. You really want to kind of impress, check out news articles, go to Google, search their name via news, understand, okay, what's happening? Are they doing blog posts? What's happening on the socials? Okay, you might uncover something through that huge amount of content that actually triggers a really interesting question. Now, the candidates who pose those types of questions to me, and I'm like, oh God, wow, this person's really kind of delved into it, and it's a genuinely interesting question. They really resonate. The ones that don't tend to do too well are kind of more the generic ones where, hey, ChatGPT, give good interview questions or something like that. The standard ones that you tend to hear. But yeah, so the ones that come from the heart are the ones that tend to, really resonate. And I would
Mhm.
definitely say go down that route. But it does require to do a bit of research as well. I mean, I think you really need to when you're in these moments, right, it's kind of about we're about kind of understanding each other. Is this going to be a fit for each other? And in order to do that, I think both parties just really need to be authentic. And it's especially if you've been doing this for a long time as a recruiter or a hiring manager who's had interviews, you're able to really identify those who like genuinely are into it and want to be there,
Yep.
and you develop this kind of sense for it. I never am an advocate of going on gut feeling. I believe you need to kind of data and try to quantify these your assessment criteria and so on. But you can't ignore the fact that feel it when someone really tries to convey that they want to be there and they're interested and they've done their research and they're ready to
Yep.
go.
Absolutely. And it goes back to the culture fit that you've mentioned several times now. So I think that also says that yeah, the technical skills are really really important, but also the there are many other elements that fit into that kind of like culture fit box that are crucial as well.
Oh
You
yes.
I think a couple of questions ago you mentioned portfolio. And I know at DIE, but I'm sure wherever, for people applying to jobs in the industry, obviously portfolio is huge. Um, I know this is a bit of a generic question, but I want to ask any do's, like must do's that are on your mental list in terms of putting together a nice portfolio or one that would
Yeah.
stand out? Any must do nots or examples that you've seen in the past that aren't the best in terms of presenting yourself?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I think the first one, which is the big one, is quality over quantity is the big one. I see this a lot with juniors, and it's I can see often, especially those who are maybe pursuing maybe the indie path. And this is again something I'd support. You need to kind of maybe show a wide breadth of skills.
Yeah.
But if you decide that you kind of want to go down the AAA route, and you say, hey, look, I'm really really focused on being like hard surface, that, um, make sure your portfolio is catered to that. And moreover, I know this is quite arbitrary, but really look at the presentation of the portfolio as well. There were some phenomenal examples of candidates, or not candidates, students I talked to at Howest last year, who've done this. Just even the simple, putting an overlay and a description on the thumbnail of their art station of each piece. Quick description, or once you go in, they may have three pieces, and you look at the presentation, and it follows a very structured and similar format. It's explained. You see all the unwraps. It's well put together. So it doesn't have to be lots, but what's there, you need to really pay attention to what you're putting out there. Um, I guess the more silly one as well is like make sure your links work as well. Like I know this sounds pretty dumb, but like I get so many applications with the portfolio and dead link, and
It's
then it's how.
tragic. That's a real tragedy. Wah, wah,
Yeah,
wah.
yeah. So yeah, so I definitely think really putting a lot of emphasis on the organization side, because a lot of the time it's going to be the recruiter who's doing the first pass. Um, Moreover, when once you start kind of like getting the hiring managers involved, this is when you need to be aware that fellow artists, animators are going to be looking at your portfolio, looking at your reel, picking it with an artistic eye. So ensure that you're happy as an artist about what you're putting out there. As much as you can do. I know it's difficult to do that at times, and a lot of artists do struggle with this. but sometimes you do just need to get it out, because if
Yeah.
there isn't any content out there for us to kind of assess you on, you're gonna really, really struggle, because the market is fierce out there.
Yeah. I am also kind of reflecting on a question that I hear a lot about a having a more specialized portfolio that really shows, for example, maybe I want to do props. I don't know. I'm just coming up with something here. So do I want to provide a really specialized portfolio, or is it more of an asset for me to show that I am capable of a lot of different skills and show more of a generalized profile? Um, in your opinion, if I'm a student, what should I focus on, and what are the main things that I should think of when I'm asking myself that question?
Yeah, this is a good. I've pondered this question as well before. Don't we? I can't remember if it was, you know, someone at Unwrap last year, and we were talking about this, and it was a really, really tough one to answer. This is it's a tough one, because I've kind of got like conflicted feelings, because I'm going to come at this and it's going to be slightly biased, because I'd be advising from the perspective of those who are wanting to go into the AAA industry,
Yeah.
because that's what we're dealing with at the moment, and that's kind of
Mhm.
yeah, what I'm seeing now. The candidates who do really well when they're trying to break into the AAA industry, they need to have direction. This is something that is really, really tough to admit to when you are just coming out of your studies. You might have just had one internship, you might not even had an internship, but with you trying to land a gig with like a AAA company, double A company, even an indie company as well, if you can show that you have some like real direction about where you want to go, that is a good signal to recruiters and to hiring managers. But it's tough, because you only have limited time to work on your portfolio. So where do you put your efforts? If you're really convinced, okay, that I'm going to make a play for this and I want to go for the AAA, my recommendation would be try and specialize. Follow your heart. What do you want to do? Do you want to go work for a studio that is doing like uh, vehicles, like like a racing studio, or do you want to
Mhm.
spend your time doing stylized art? If you want to do that, start there. Okay, there's a lot of people who get started in the industry out of university. It takes them a while to get their first gig. They try a few things, then it starts happening. So not to be discouraged. You can always kind of start again if you.
You mentioned also like the kind of indie versus triple A scene. And I want to ask if there are certain things that candidates should kind of keep into consideration, tips and tricks that might differ or apply differently if they're applying or looking for employment in the indie scene versus searching for employment in double A or triple A companies.
Yeah, in all honesty, I'm not too versed in what's happening in the indie scene, but what I will say, and is commendable, I know that the people working on indie games, they wear a lot of hats, and they have to be really, really robust and versatile, um, because they tend to have quicker production cycles, smaller teams, which requires more varied and more T-shaped profiles. So if that's what your passion is, then I would definitely be considering going that route. And those types of studios and those types of games can definitely appeal to people who might not quite know exactly what they want to do yet. They might want to get involved in a lot of different things.
Yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
like dipping your feet in multiple different ponds or whatever, whatever the saying is.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
exactly.
in that way, your advice would kind of differ then. So if a candidate would be looking for kind of a junior position in an indie studio, maybe then it's better to have slightly more generalized portfolio. While
Yeah,
if you're
I would.
going for double A, triple A, maybe more specialized portfolio really shows that you have a good sense of what you want to do specifically within this company that is quite larger.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you hit the nail on the head there.
I want to also kind of take it away from the like advice for potential candidates and students and juniors and whoever's looking for employment at the moment, and ask on the behalf of the studio. So of course, IO, this is just an example. I wanted to know, compared to 6 years ago, um, are there any qualities that you are deeming or might deem more important in a candidate now in 2025? Also coming off a quite difficult year in terms of massive layoffs in the industry. Are there any qualities that you deem essential now or maybe more important than you did 6 years ago?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely, look, we need to first of all acknowledge that gaming industry over the past few years has decimated. I was looking before we jumped on this call just at some of the studios that even just closed this year and then going back last year. And it's actually quite startling when you look at it. And it was like, oh my God, like living through that and kind of seeing that like on the front line was really, really intense and it was really, really hard. And it's tough now because what you see is this kind of huge influx of like super talented individuals into the marketplace who've all been made redundant. Studios who are able to retain their staff, retain like the real you know excellent candidates, and there's a lot of candidates who are as amazing who unfortunately are let go. So you find yourself in this like hyper competitive market with not a huge selection to choose from, and with a lot of companies having quite fixed policies like the hybrid, the working from home thing, and they can have to stick to that because hey, look, the rest of our employees are honoring this. They may have to change their own values about what they wanted. They may previously wanted to be fully remote, but that studio may not be offering that anymore. So hey, they might have to change their whole lifestyle. So it's a lot of disruption at the end of the day, Ali, and it's tough. So how does that translate into what do we look for when we're recruiting? Well, this is a question that we asked ourselves recently, especially when it comes to leadership profiles. Okay, and I think resilience was one of the ones that we really kind of picked up on. Is we're looking for because it is tough, and it's a slug trying to ship a game. So it's certainly people with that willing to keep pushing through. Those with kind of like low accountability when it comes to the overall management. We want to try and ensure that our team are empowered by our managers to do what they do. So there's certainly a few things that kind of crop to mind, but flexibility as well is a big one.
It's interesting also the list of skills and kind of competencies that you listed that are really important for you now as compared to in previous years. They kind of all were soft skills. Um and I am also kind of wondering if these soft skills like flexibility, like resilience, um how do you measure that in an interview? Or like what kind of things do you
Yeah,
specifically look for when it comes to like, is this candidate resilient? Will this person work well?
yeah.
Maybe if they need to make changes or kind of like pivot a bit, what do you look for?
Okay, yeah. So there's a few ways that we can do this, and if we're just talking purely about the soft skills, there are a set of competency-based questions that are trained to be able to deliver, so we know how to frame questions in a way that we can get candidates to explain a situation and seeing how they actually handle that. That's a really good
Mhm.
one. For leadership profiles, one of the things that we have in place, and this is exclusive to producers, leads, HR recruiters, anyone who has direct and regular contact with people, usually in a management capacity, but sometimes just in a, hey, we're spending a lot of time talking.
Right.
And we work with this a service called People Test Systems. They're a Danish company, and they provide a personality profile and software quiz, but they're a team of psychiatrists who worked on basically putting this together, and it's a super cool tool. The team went on a 2-day training course learning how to interpret the results, and essentially, the top and bottom of it is you get a 28 attributes where you are more or likely to display these, and the recruiter then is to deliver an interview which lasts around an hour and a half with one of our people managers, like kind of more of a coaching presence in IO.
Mm-hmm.
And we just go through and we understand, okay, how do you work as a person? If you, for example, you may have extreme high levels of accountability. Is that, why is that? What happened in your previous role that made you feel that way? Is that going to be an issue? Because if you're, for example, a producer, you need to have maybe lower end on the accountability side. So we have some actual kind of hard tools that we can use to help with this. Now,
Yep.
the thing is, you can't take a look at these results and look at them at face value. The interview is absolutely necessary because that is going to uncover all of the context behind these results, and the context is everything.
Mm-hmm.
So we have these tools and we have a framework. So we know what we look for specifically at IO. We know exactly what we kind of want. We've worked with this team, we've worked with our executive team, and we've basically laid out a template, kind of not the ideal profile, but essentially what we're looking for. So
Yeah, okay.
there's,
That's super interesting. So it is like quantified in some way.
yeah, it is. And but one thing that we're like we're really trying to make sure doesn't happen is that the tests are just taken at face value. Okay, yes, there is an ideal kind of match that we might be looking for, but that's not to say that if you don't necessarily have all of the criteria, we're going to find something in the interview that just goes, yep, you're the person. So
Right.
we have that. There's also team interviews. The team needs to get involved and see how this person is going to interact with them. So we have multiple different touch points to make sure that, hey, this person's kind of who we want to bring in.
I want to take it back to so we talked a bit from the perspective to of the studio. I want to take it back to the perspective of the candidate. If I am a recently graduated student, or maybe I was employed in another sector that is not, maybe it's adjacent to the games industry, but it's not the games industry. How important in terms of hiring, and I know this is might very well be a difficult question to answer. How important is prior relevant experience? And if I'm a student, for example, who just graduated, maybe I did a 6 month internship at the tail end of my studies. How can I advocate for myself in an industry that
Yeah.
honestly values past experience?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I mean, I think the first and the most obvious one is to make it known that you're interested in the gaming industry. So I've actually had cases at IO where we've hired people from outside of the industry, and these are people who, on a technical level, are very proficient. Okay, so there are certain roles such as, programming roles, tools, or engine, so on, where okay, we know, okay, C++, we're looking for extremely proficient users of this language. And those who are able to demonstrate that and they've got work experience in maybe a software development company doing something, but they're saying, hey, I want to work on games now. Good enough for us. Come on in. If you can show that you know your way around, and you can deliver, let's do it. It becomes a little bit more complicated when you start looking at other roles. I think, for artists as well, yes, you're going to be creating stuff, or might be doing graphic design, or as you're trying to kind of segue into the gaming industry, really, you need to be working on your portfolio a lot, especially when you're trying to get involved in the gaming industry. I've got a lot of friends who are trying to kind of break in at the moment, and they have had to do a lot. I'm talking really. pushing yourself to make the time to work in the evenings on your portfolio, go to meetups, go to events, see if you can find a mentor. You need to really try and push the boat, because that's one thing that you can work on, and it's up to you how much effort you put in. Your portfolio is going to be the key that's going to open the door there. So yeah.
Yeah. For people who really have invested a lot of time and energy into their portfolios, and they're really trying and putting themselves out there as much as humanly possible, and maybe are still struggling to find employment in the games industry in 2024, 2025, what are some major pieces of advice, if you have any, for those individuals?
Yeah, so I would say the first one is just to have regular check-ins about what you're actually putting out there. So a lot of people, when they're really trying to get into this big cycle of applying, not hearing back, applying, not hearing back, and sometimes you can maybe forget actually about what am I putting out there. You need to go check, is my CV looking good? Do I need to reformat my portfolio? Is there something I need to change here? So that would be like the first thing I'd be doing. Second thing is, I would be maybe seriously thinking about considering doing some freelancing on the side. It's very subjective. It depends on the person. Okay, is this person not going to be able to pay the rent if they don't find a job? If if it's going to be a case of that, then I think we need also to be realistic that you might have to pursue maybe uh, occupation that runs parallel whilst you're working on maybe boot camps, game jams, trying to do all of these things that are going to add all of that experience around, which is going to be very, very useful for you to break into the industry, or to show that I'm keen, I want to get in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So taking a step back, saying, let me look at what I'm putting out there. Let me ask people also for their advice, their opinions. You mentioned also trying to find a mentor. And I think
Yeah.
that's a super valuable point that you make.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you have someone that you look up to who can give you some guidance and give you something, that big pat on the back when you need that,
Yeah.
that's really, really valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think also sometimes we don't, like when you're in your own rut bubble kind of situation, there's nobody by yourself like to pat yourself on the back. And so I think if you have a mentor in that way, you're getting external feedback, you're getting like external guidance that you wouldn't really have otherwise, and also like a sense of external accountability that you don't have when it's just yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, someone believes in you as well. It's and,
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's at a time when you kind of need that as well.
Exactly. Yeah, and sometimes you do have to search for it, but I do find it really important. Like there are some people that I really look up to in the industry as well who are kind of doing similar things that I am also busy with. And honestly, sometimes when I'm feeling like insecure or down in any way, shape, or form, like it really does help to have other people who are doing kind of like adjacent work to look up to and also to chat with. I don't like to use the phrase ping pong because it seems so like corporate, but sometimes you really do need like somebody to I really don't like that phrase. I have to find something else. If anybody is watching this and has another recommendation for the phrase ping pong, I will gladly take it.
Yeah,
But yeah, you need someone to converse with. Yeah, because sometimes it's can be lonely.
absolutely. And I think that's why, as well, game jams are just such a great opportunity, because you can meet people in the same boat, and if you form these connections. And one of the things that I'm a huge advocate of, and it was something that I tried to spend quite a bit of my presentation last time at Unwrap, talking about this to the students, Howest. Really need to kind of focus on networking as early as possible. And I know it's like scary when you first do it, because like I remember the first time I had to go to a networking event, and it was like terrifying, especially when it's like in person. Okay, but
Right.
nowadays, like LinkedIn is it's really good for that. Don't rely heavily on it, but one of the big things I really push is you need to start working on your personal brand quick. Like, I'm going to give a shout out to like one guy who I saw at last year, Rickety Rubin. This person absolutely nailed it. Okay, like this is a perfect example. He had a great portfolio, laid out really well, catchy tagline. Didn't have anything in animation at the time for him, but I said I'll always remember that. And that's a really really good example of someone who just like took out.
I wonder what
Yeah.
Rickety Rubin is up to these days.
Oh, yeah. Maybe we should check first, but
Yeah. Rickety
yeah,
Rubin, if you're watching this, let us
yeah,
know. We've discussed a bit of the challenges for candidates and potential new hires in the games industry. I kind of want to ask about your own challenges as a recruiter. We've mentioned the pandemic. We've also mentioned massive layoff. So actually, within these 5 or 6 years, as a games recruiter, a lot has happened also in the meanwhile. So I'd love to hear a bit of if you had to think of like one or a couple major challenges that you've kind of encountered during this time and how you've navigated them.
Well, I think, probably the biggest one, and one that probably hits a lot of recruiters who might listen to this, who are currently in employment, is this kind of not a survivor guilt, but when you are kind of having multiple calls a day with like super, super talented people who've
Yeah.
been made redundant, sometimes in the worst and most horrific ways that you just didn't think that another. And again, I will never mention any names, but you hear some real horror stories about how these situations were handled, and it happens a lot. It's a conversation that happens more often than I'd definitely care to admit, and I think the big thing is ensuring that you don't become desensitized to that. Um, that was probably one of the kind of, I guess, one of the more negative things. One of the more positive things I definitely see is, you know, the buzz when we're just hiring some awesome people. The games that we're making now, we might not necessarily have the knowledge in some areas to build these parts, and that's we're bringing in some absolute killers into the team. Some real solid people, and I think especially in this climate, that feeling of receiving such a talented individual to come work in our team and bring all this expertise, and now they feel secure because they're part of something, that they've got a salary now, their family's going to be okay, we're going to have someone who's going to help us finish the game. I think that feeling is also amplified, especially given the climate.
What is one thing, if you could come up with like the one major thing that you wish applicants knew before applying to IO, for example, other game studios, what is the one thing that maybe is commonly misunderstood or not realized enough that you would like to impart on those folks?
Okay. I'll pick one which is kind of like a bit of a hot topic now that I see floating around, being discussed on LinkedIn and whatnot. The use of AI in the screening processes.
Yeah.
So AI has definitely made its way into recruitment in varying different ways. Definitely on the applicant side as well as the on the candidate on the client side as well. Now, I would say, look, the obvious if a candidate is using maybe an AI tool where it might be transcribing and then giving you some answers. It's happened once where our team picked up on it, but like I've seen other cases, so just avoid that. But there is this big misconception that like studios will use like AI tools to scan resumes and to like on a first pass. Now, I know for certain that the tool that we use doesn't do that, and a lot of the leading tools out there, like Greenhouse, was probably the most known and top ones, Team Taylor for certain. Uh, we can use a bit of AI in the back end, okay? And what I'm talking about, you may see screening questions that may say, okay, how many years of experience do you have for the role? 1 to 5. Um, do you have experience using this specific bit of software, etc., etc. Now, because we talked a bit earlier about it being such a saturated market and it being a lot of applicants, I've just recently closed the role there. We had excess of 300 applications in 1 week. It was insane. And the only way that we as recruiters can filter some of these applications is by, setting, a bunch of questions, trying to focus purely on key criteria. Now,
Hmm.
during an intake meeting, we insist from the hiring managers that we know exactly, okay, what is the need from this person, and we really think about it, and then that forms the basis of these questions. So it doesn't automatically reject you, and I would never condone as someone who's set up these processes in the back end. I would never advise a studio to do an auto reject like that, but you can use those questions to separate and to sift. So just to
Right.
be mindful that if a company might not get back to you immediately, it may just because did you answer positively to all of the screening questions? Okay, that would be the first thing I'd be asking. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so that's probably one, the AI thing.
Right.
And also with the cover letters as well, it can be a bit obvious as well. Uh, but yeah, so just be aware of that.
You mentioned cover letters, and I'm just thinking of, I mean, Chat GPT has been really, um, I think, widely used for cover letters, motivation letters, like even CVs. And I wonder what your policy is. Maybe you have a policy, maybe you have advice,
Yeah.
tips, tricks in terms of candidates using AI tools for materials that they would deliver for the hiring process.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, look, if we're talking about a CV, which is basically a factual statement of skills and experience, and you use an AI tool to lay that out, I don't have an issue with that. I think it starts entering into murky waters when you start kind of talking about personal statements, when you start talking about professional experience summaries and so on, where you expect to be able to see a bit of the candidate's personality. That's when I think it becomes a little bit of a gray area. Um, and it definitely becomes a no-go area when we start talking about the certain parts of the assessment. Can't be using maybe AI image generation tools during an art test. You know, or for example, you can't be relying on an AI tool to solving your coding problems as well.
Yeah.
That's obviously a big red flag. Um, but look, let's also not ignore the fact that once you get into the world of work, AI is definitely becoming a thing, and it's definitely permeating into all facets of game dev, ranging from all the way from production to the operations side as well. So we need to kind of keep an open mind to it as well.
Yeah. Actually, has it influenced to date the hiring process in any way in terms of profiles that you're looking for? Or is it kind
N
of too soon to say that?
No, not really. I mean, I think again, it's the use of the AI is very much like a sifting tool.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a hey, okay, let's separate this. So we have like a list of maybe 10 candidates who have got 5 out of 5 on all of the attributes we're looking for. Okay, for example, plus 3 years experience. A experience in a certain software, maybe a degree in a specific field, okay, hard things that we look for that are necessary for that job. Um,
Mhm.
we're basically splitting that out like that. Candidates who
Right.
may not have replied positively to those questions are still going to get reviewed. So
Hmm.
that's what I'm saying. We want to make sure that AI doesn't actually make any decisions for us. It just
Yeah,
helps
yeah.
us become more organized. And again, there's other uses of it. For example, diary scheduling amongst multiple people. It just speeds things up and it allows us as recruiters to, focus on what matters, ensuring that we're giving good feedback to our candidates. So we have time to ensure that we're collecting feedback from the interviews and, a lot of the things that recruiters tend to spend a lot of time on, that now we don't have to. So we can do the
Right.
good stuff.
I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of the realm of recruitment in the games industry. Where are we going in 2025? If we sat here like 11 months later, what are you hoping or maybe expecting to see in recruitment this year?
Yeah. So, um, I honestly believe that we're going to be experiencing the next boom very soon because we really, really went through a awful time. Big studios closing, lots of layoffs. But look, that's a lot of talent all of a sudden flooding into the same ecosystem, and they're smart, talented people make great games. And when those people get together, good things happen. And yeah, honestly, I think it's only a matter of time before we start seeing an emergence of these kind of smaller studios founded by game directors, heads of design, art directors who've worked on some of the big titles, and they're going to come together and they're going to put together teams honoring the requests for these kind of hybrid, flexible models. Different studios will have different approaches, but it's only a matter of time before all of this talent gets back together and starts creating awesome stuff.
So does
But
that kind of mean that you see a slightly more indie shift in the future?
definitely. Yeah, definitely. Like definitely more indie or double A, even like, some triple A studios as well can, emerge as well if they have the right funding. So the fact is, look, the talent's there in the marketplace, okay? Problem is that, incorporating a company, getting people together, getting someone who can organize that, sometimes securing the funding, it's a lot of effort and it's difficult. But if people can get coordinated and do that, there's 100% enough creativity, idea, and talent there to make some cool stuff happen. And
Yep.
peaks and troughs, isn't it? It's ups and downs. I think every industry goes through it. And I'm excited. I think we're going to learn from this. And COVID had a lot to do with it, that huge hiring boom. And yeah, so I'm very positive for what's going to come, Ali.
Thank you so much, Connor, for coming on here and having a chat with me about recruitment in the games industry. Where are we going from here in 2025? Thank you so much for joining. Any last words, Connor, to our audience out there who may be watching and may be in the games industry or not in the games industry or looking to apply to a studio? Any last final words?
Yeah, well, I'll just say thanks for having me, and to anyone who's out there listening, just don't be discouraged. Be persistent, keep trying, something will come through. And as an industry, I know that we're going to bounce back.
Thank you so much, everybody, for watching this episode of Game for Thought with Connor Curran, all about recruitment in the games industry. We will see you next time. Bye bye.
Nice,
That's a wrap.
good.
I'm doing the